So welcome back. That's that's the fourth. I will need to practice my math. This is fourth talk, and I would like to introduce Katja. And she will do her show. Okay, the stage is yours. Welcome.
Okay, that was a really short introduction. Lucky for you guys, I have a little one of my own, so that's fine. So hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about evolving a beyond tests, an agile approach, and why I think we should delete the in-test column from every Scrum board that is out there. This is a little agenda of my talk, right? So I know everybody's waiting for the party now. This is what we're going to go through first, and then you have one more. It's not going to be too long. Personally, I have been working in software development for, it says more than 15 years. It's actually far closer to 20, but it just sounds better over 15 than saying just under 20, right? Currently, I am working as a freelance consultant and coach in my own company. Before that, I was head of delivery in a small startup. Before that, I worked as a consultant for quite a while, and generally speaking, I came to testing, like many testers, a little bit from the side. I used to be a chef before. And then I wanted better work time and a better work-life balance, right? More 9 to 5 than 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the evening. And so I started in software, basically. I focus these days mainly on helping teams to become high-delivering teams in the DevOps sense, deliver frequently, quickly, with predictable quality, right? So remove all of the obstacles, stop making tests the bottleneck. This is kind of what I'm talking about. And as a leader, I personally really dislike telling people what to do, but I really like helping people figure out what the next best thing to do is. So I really am into that. And I have been working remotely long before remote was popular or became popular during the pandemic recently, right? So I have a particular interest in helping teams develop a good remote culture, because I think working remotely needs a lot of intentionality to be really good. Anyways, none of that we are talking about today. Today we are talking about testing and Agile. And I'm not here to teach Granny to suck eggs, right? You all know about testing and Agile. We have heard a little bit about testing and Agile already, so I'm not going to go that far back. But I can't gloss over the fact that a lot of the teams I have been working with, I have been coaching, tell me about the same problem they have. And that problem is that testing isn't actually really very agile. So they have their Scrum boards, and they have their in-test column. And all of the testing happens towards the end of the sprint, 5 minutes before demo. I see nodding, so I assume you all know that feeling, right? So the only thing I think for the agile understanding of testing we need to think about today is what testing should be and what testing shouldn't be. Right, so modern testing, in my opinion, should be focused on helping teams deliver quickly with predictable quality. It is not about making everything perfect. It is not about being a 2-week bottleneck. It is not about creating the quality gate, right? It is not about one person's responsibility, and it is not about a time-boxed activity that happens at the end of the sprint. How do we get there? Well, I think the way to get there is to think about quality as testing and start thinking about how we can make quality something that happens continuously. This is your vanilla Scrum board. If you go into Jira, probably everybody knows Jira. We all hate Jira, right? This is what happens if you click Create Board, right? You get a 3-column board that has to do, in progress, and done. Not much to it. A lot of people don't like that. Specifically, a lot of management doesn't like that, because where is the testing happening? How can we know that people actually testing stuff, right? We need to be able to look at the board and know when the testing is, so we can ask people, what the status of the quality is. So we created the end-test column. Superficially, that adds some clarity. Now we know things are either waiting to be worked on, they are being worked on, they are being tested, and then they are done. Now, in reality, though, I think what that gave us is silos between developers and testers, and it gave us handoffs, delays, and bottlenecks. Just the thing we didn't want, right? So what we have created here is perceived quality checkpoints rather than actual continuous quality. Let's look a little bit at why that happens. Some stuff happens before any work item enters your Jira board, right? Planning, prioritizations, you may be doing some backlog grooming, and so on. You may be doing some estimations. Personally, I hate them, but you know. Anyways, your ticket enters the Scrum board, and your tester is like, don't know what to do with this. If it's a good tester, and I'm sure you all are good testers, you may be thinking about test cases at this point already. You may be checking documentation, right? You may be thinking about, do I have my test environments in order? Do I need any new test data? However, none of that is obvious on the board. As far as the board is concerned, you're doing nothing. It's not ideal, is it? Now a developer picks the item up, starts working on it. No? Well, if you have a great developer, they will probably be writing some unit tests. If you're really lucky, they're writing some integration tests. If you're fantastically lucky, they will even consult you about it. Right? And you can pair with a developer, and you're like, yeah, almost there, almost, right? So now the thing enters the in-test column. Hooray! Finally, we have something to work on, right? So now you're doing all the things. Now you may be deploying into test environments. Maybe that happened automatically, maybe not. Now you will be doing smoke tests. You will be probably performing some sort of scripted testing, manually, automated, who cares, right? Scripted testing happens. You may be thinking about non-functional tests. There will be bugs to file. Then there may be fixes for the bugs coming, right? So all of the things happen is and can you finish all of that before demo tomorrow? And clearly we've all been there. So this is what I think psychologically happens there. Humans like order. Our brains have evolved to spot patterns. That's what we're really good at, because that is what kept us safe out in the savannah with the big lions back in the day, right? Everything has its place, and something is out of the place. That is when we need to pay attention. So we like to have things in order. We put testing in a nice, neat little box, and that's great, because we don't need to think about this anymore until somebody opens the box. Right? So now we need to do all of the testing. A thing in a box is a beautiful thing. It's a known thing. It is a defined thing. This, however, unfortunately, then creates the notion of testing as an end-of-process thing, right? It's a process that happens at the end of the sprint, because we know it's in this little box. And that, I think, gives us an illusion of progress rather than of progression rather than actual progress. A few years ago, I was working on a team. I was working as a senior consultant in a consultancy in the north of England, in Leeds, close to where I live. And we were working with a client from the healthcare sector. They are a fairly big provider of scheduling software for GP practices. So a GP is basically your family doctor. That is the doctor you need to see when you're sick, right? Scheduling doctor appointments in the UK, I don't know how it is here, is a feat, right? It's very, very hard to get an appointment. And these people wanted to build a better scheduling software. And in the beginning, it was a little bit interesting. So our project owner, he was very senior in the company, and he was quite keen to work with us in the consultancy because he was really keen on learning how his teams could deliver faster, because he thought they were a little bit slow. However, he didn't quite understand why I wanted to come to all the meetings, because I'm the tester. Why would you need to be at the planning meeting? But, he was open-minded. He invited me. And he started to like the questions I asked. He started to like my contributions. He saw some value in me being there. So we developed a fairly solid working relationship. That then, in turn, led to him being a little bit more interested in the testing. So every other day or so, he would come to me to talk to me about the status of the testing. And he would ask me, so how's the testing? And I'm like, great. How many test cases have we executed? And I would say, all of them. And he would say, okay, how many of them have passed? I said, all of them. Because if they don't all pass, then we don't merge. That's the long and short of it. I said, oh, okay, yeah, great. And then he would go and talk to the important people on the team. One day, we were just having this conversation, and we could see a test run fail in real time on one of our dashboards. So I was kind of only paying half attention to him, half attention to the dashboard. And whilst it was failing, we had our conversation, said, thanks, guy. Turned around and started talking to the developer about these failing tests. That was not the first test run that had failed for this particular piece of functionality. And we were discussing basically of whether the tests were broken or the functionality was broken. As it turned out, it was both. Always particularly fun debugging sessions. However, the product owner hung around a little bit and listened in on the conversation we were having. And when I was done talking to the developer, I turned around, go to my desk to check something. And the product owner looked at me with big bright eyes and was like, oh my God, I finally got it. You don't merge if not all of the tests pass. I said, yes. So he had a bit of a revelation in that moment. Right? So what he had understood in that moment is, yeah, I have test in my title, and I do test, But mainly what I do is I help other people test. I explain to them how to test things. I explain to them where to test things. I ask the hard questions. I have worked with this particular developer on this particular ticket before it even entered the sprint, to make sure we have requirements, to make sure that we expect the same thing, to discuss how are we going to test this, do we need test data? Is this maybe a good moment in time to introduce a performance test suite? Do we need UI tests? Is anybody going to do any exploratory testing? And so on and so forth. You know the drill. So the mental shift that happened in that moment for this product owner, that is exactly the mental shift that I want to talk about. Right? This shift where you go from testing is quality to quality is a whole lot more than testing. Because quality is not an end goal. Quality is an ongoing process. Which is why confining testing or thinking of testing as this little time box thing at the end of your sprint is really problematic. Because testing is not quality. You cannot test quality into a product. You've probably all heard that before, right? So the way I work with the teams I have been coaching is we create a clear path through the board. We take the in-test column out, and we create something that is really more Scrum-ban, right? It's not really Kanban, which I like. If you have a really mature team that can do things well, Kanban is great. Most teams I work with are teams that have just done Agile transformation, and they suffer from so they have other problems to solve, right? Because what that gives you is an opportunity to model behavior. If you have very clear expectations along the way, then that makes things a lot easier. A lot of Scrum boards, I find, is like, the vanilla Jira board that I showed earlier. They get thrown in front of the team, and then nobody ever talks about specifically what we actually expect to happen in them. Which is why I think conversations need to happen about what clear set of conditions need to be met before you move a ticket from one column to the next. And once you have that clear and you have that documented somewhere, then you're at a point where everybody can make sure these things happen. You're away from only the tester can ask about quality. Everybody can now check that all the requirements we have for delivering a high-quality product have been met. So this is an example workflow we started with. This may look overly complicated, and it is a little bit, but I'm going to talk you through it, why this is. So what is on your left side here? This is where humans are heavily involved. If your team is quite mature and you have a good automation process, if you have a good CI/CD pipeline, then once something has passed code review, the rest of this basically, it's merged, it's deployed into a test environment. It may go into another test environment. It depends. A lot of this depends on your context. It's deployed into a staging environment. It goes onto a prod environment. A lot of that can be automated, and you don't need that on your board because your board is for the humans. Your board is to help humans do the right thing along the way. And one of the ways I like to do that is with very clear exit criteria. Exit criteria is what I said, this set of conditions that helps you understand whether a ticket is ready to go from A to B. And to make that a little bit clearer, I'm going to just talk through a little bit in detail. The easiest of all of them, right? Ticket goes from to do in progress. Because nothing happens other than somebody decides they're now free to do some work. Take a ticket, start working on it. Well, not really. Because really what you want to make sure at that point is that somebody has looked at the requirements and has made sure that they are really well defined. Do we have dependencies? I know in an ideal world we don't. In the real world, however, we usually do. Have we talked about these dependencies? Do we have a plan how we can deal with these dependencies? Maybe we need a new database schema. Have we talked to the team that can actually make that happen? Have we made a plan how we deal with that when we go live? Do we go live? Does the database schema go live first? How do we line these things up, right? And how do we test this? Because ideally, we want to know how we test things. How can we show a stakeholder that what we have built here does what they expect it to do? And very little of what they're not expect. Right? So all of these questions should be asked and answered before anything moves into in progress. There may be other things. Maybe the ticket gets picked up by somebody who has a very specialized knowledge. And that person is the only person that knows the thing that needs to happen in the ticket. But they're also going on holiday the day after tomorrow. Then you have a ticket that is started sitting on your Scrum board and not going anywhere. Right? No idea. So really what you probably want to do is have a good old Three Amigos session. There you can ask all of these questions, make sure that you have answers to them, or at least know where to go to find the answers. Maybe, actually, you want to make that visible on the board. Because the board really, like I said before, the board helps us model our behavior, but the board also helps us to know where we are in the process. So maybe you chuck in a new step between to do and in progress. Maybe you have a step that says elaboration, because then, that way, you take a lot of mental overhead away from it. Somebody becomes free and they want to start working on something. They can signal to the rest of the team, I will need a couple of people who meet with me and talk this through. They don't have the onus anymore to just go around and find those people, right? If they have a Scrum Master or team lead, they can call this out in the stand-up, which makes things a whole lot easier. So then, now we know we have elaborated this. Now, exit criteria, obviously, are not born like Venus from a shell. Exit criteria, in fact, are highly context dependent. So I would advise to not just go and Google some and copy them onto your board. I usually say to do a workshop with your team. It can be quite simple and it can be quite low tech, but it is quite important that the entire team is there and buys into this. So bring the whole team together, invite your stakeholders if you can. Discuss what good looks like for you. Right? What is good for Google is not necessarily what is good for you. A banking application has a different threshold of quality than maybe a weather app, right? Or maybe you are in the healthcare sector. People can die if you do things wrong, but people probably won't die immediately if the weather is a degree out, right? Ideally then, everybody takes post-it notes and just write on one point per post-it note, write down what you think needs to happen between you start work and you reach this is what good looks like. All of the things, right? Be very specific. Testing is not a thing that needs to happen. Writing unit tests is a thing that needs to happen. And then you can just group them into columns and see, do things as early as you can. So don't put things off. And then you basically, with that, you can create your own Scrum board, because then you have created a clear pathway to good. You have basically, a timeline, right? These discussions can be a little bit tricky. Quite often in the team, not everybody has the same view on what is good and how do we get there. So try to aim for consent rather than consensus. Make sure that every concern is heard, but you don't need to solve every problem right there. And you don't have to get it right immediately. Figure out a good model that you want to start working with, and then, iterate. Keep your eyes on it. See where the bottlenecks are. If things get stuck somewhere, look at whether you need to take away a step or maybe add in a step. Obviously, you will need to document the exit criteria. Ideally, if you have a physical board in an office, put them on the board. That may not be possible. So you may have to put it in Confluence. However, we all know what happens to Confluence pages, right? You read them every morning with your morning coffee. Yeah, no, exactly. Nobody ever looks at them. So have somebody call these things out in stand-up, right? At least until this has become a habit for everybody. Somebody should say, okay, I see you have moved this ticket from to-do into in progress. Have you done this? Have we done this? Do we know? Have we answers to these questions? Right? Everybody can do that. Everybody should help. And then it becomes a pattern and a habit, and it's really quite easy. Now, what happens to the other written test artifacts that we all love so much, like a test strategy? Okay. Well, personally, I like test strategies, but I like to keep them really high level. I like my test strategy to describe how we are going to test and maybe touch a little bit on what frameworks and tools we want to use. But, I think the days of where test strategy was a 10-centimeter document that details every test case that you could potentially possibly run, I think those days are over. You may want to talk about supplementary tests like non-functional tests. You definitely want to have thought about data and environment requirements, because those things often take time to set up. That is not something you do on the fly, right? You will want to plan for that. There may be other considerations that are specific to your context. Do we need to write task plans? You can probably see that I am not the biggest fan. I will say, again, this is highly context dependent. And I will say that I think the process of planning is extremely valuable. I think having a plan, considerably less so. Make your own decisions on what makes sense for you. Really important, however, for this whole thing to work is you need to have insight into your live system, into your test runs and so on and so forth. So you will want dashboards that show you real-time information about code coverage, maybe a bit of a two-sided sword, right? Like it, hate it, we all do. But I think it's useful to know where code coverage can be useful to know where to expect defects or where you want to look particularly closely if you do some exploratory testing, for example. You definitely want to know the build status at all times. This you probably get out of your CI tool anyways. Just make sure that it's easily accessible and people can see it. Ideally, again, monitor on the wall in your office if you're in an office. If not, put something together that people can easily access from home. Don't put it behind the firewall that nobody can get past, right? You will want to know your test execution time. Personally, I'm not somebody who is blessed with a whole lot of patience. So any automated test suite that takes more than 15 minutes, nope, lost me. At that point, you will want to start looking at running tests in parallel. There are ways to fix these things. Do not start with a 7-hour overnight thing, if you can possibly avoid it, right? You will want some performance metrics on your application, but also on your test runs, on your test performance. Obviously, you will want to know what your environments are doing. So that is, at a glance, I will always want to know at least 2 things. Are all my environments up or down? And is a deploy in progress or not? Now, do we need to visualize the testing part of each ticket? You can probably guess what I'm going to say, right? But however, should we have subtasks? Some teams I work with really love subtasks, right? They have the ticket and then they have 12 subtasks that need to be done for this ticket to be done. Personally, I think if you need 12 subtasks, your ticket is too big. Your ticket should be a thin vertical slice. You should be delivering one small piece of value, the smallest piece of value that or the smallest piece of code that delivers the value. That is what you should be doing, and that normally doesn't take 12 subtasks. Sometimes there's no way around this. Sometimes you have very complex tasks, right? So none of what I'm saying here is set in stone. I would like to repeat, it is highly dependent on your context. Swim lanes, also a favorite. Personally, I think they make things more confusing rather than clearer, but people, perceive things differently. If you have a physical board, should you use color-coded cards, maybe? I would say no. I think none of that really helps. What you want is people working together. So this could be a whole talk and a workshop, a 5-hour workshop in its own right. So I'm going to gloss over this a little bit here. How do you transition to this new workshop? Well, don't just go to your team and say, guys, here, this is our new workshop. I thought about this. I think this is going to work great for us. Let's stop with this nonsense we have been doing. Again, engage the team. Have a workshop. What I said, the workshop I lined out earlier, discuss with people what they think good looks like and discuss with them how they think you can get there. Everybody will have an opinion, and get all of these opinions in. You may not be able to incorporate everything of that, but you want to have heard all of that. You may need to train people up. Maybe your test team, as we have heard just before me, is not very good at understanding code or writing code. I wasn't very good at writing code a few years ago. However, there are ways to get people into coding or into working with developers that don't necessarily require you to be the best coder in the room, right? So for example, you can always help out with a code review. You don't need to understand in painstaking detail what the code does to be able to spot that variables are not named very well. For example, you don't need to understand in painstaking detail what the code does to spot that there is a bit of commented out code in there that probably shouldn't go to production. To-dos in the code. So, learn a little bit about clean coding or clean code and what that means and help people spot that. Another great way to get into this is to learn how to configure a CI pipeline. That is a very code-adjacent task that doesn't really require a lot of coding, but it takes time, and people in your team will love you if you can help them figure this shit out. So there are ways to get people in there that don't require you to take your entire test team and ship them off to a 6-week course. And then, of course, monitor your progress. do regular introspectives, look at what works, what doesn't work, get some metrics out of your board. Jira, for example, and other tools do that as well. They give you reports where you can see where tickets spend the most time, for example. So if something regularly gets stuck in a code review, that is something you need to look at. Then you probably need to work with your team and help them understand that a code review always takes priority. Before you pick up any new work, you pick up a code review. Have people pair on them, or have people, even better, have people pair before it comes to the code review, because then you have already 2 sets of eyes on your code, and the review will be much, much faster. So there are a lot of things you can make to help this process go smoothly. Well, and once you've done all that, you're ready to reap the benefits. So you now have much, much, much enhanced collaboration in your team, because you now really have all hands on quality. You have a streamlined process, right? Your tester no longer spends 2/3 of the time waiting for them to actually, be able to do something. And you have truly increased transparency, because now everybody knows what is happening at every step of the way, because it is now there on your board for everybody to see. So in conclusion, if you can remove the mental model of quality happens in test, right, you then enable a truly agile workflow. And you unblock testing work from the end of the sprint, because you have now created multiple quality checkpoints. Thank you. Questions?
So first, thank you really for the very interesting presentation and talk. My question is, what are your exit criteria for switching the tasks from backlog to to-do? Because from my point of view, what you said for switch from to-do to in progress, I would do it actually before switching it to do.
That is perfectly valid. I have worked with teams who do it like that. So you can do that. I have seen both ways, right? I have seen teams that like to do all of the elaborations before something goes into to-do. And I have seen teams who like to do that between the to-do and the in progress. It's valid, like I said. So a lot of this is really context dependent. A lot of this depends on how mature your team is. You may have a team that is really good at the elaboration stage, but is maybe not so great at code reviews. Right? So then you want to focus your attention there a little bit. So what I really like about this process is that it gives you the opportunity to really look at where things get stuck. And you can then shine a light on that and say, okay, what else do we need to do here to help people to succeed? Right? Because I don't want anybody to be working on a ticket and the work they are doing is running around, trying to find out information, trying to find out what's up with the test environment, trying to find out X, Y, Z, right? I want them to focus on the work that needs doing. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Hop, hop.
I have also a question about the exit criteria, because I'm not sure if I fully understand. In your case, you are doing some form of Scrumban in the component that you're using as example.
Yeah.
Are you still having the backlog refinements on that kind of stuff? Because
Yes.
I think I understood that you're basically doing it when moving from the to-do to in progress.
No, that is a ticket elaboration. The backlog refinement happens outside of the board anyways.
Okay, thanks.
And to add, if I may add to that, I am a huge fan of a small backlog. If I personally do Scrum Master for the team, I run an automation that closes every ticket automatically that hasn't been touched in 3 months.
Katja, thank you very much. Brilliant, thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you.
To achieve this, removing testing column and make it sure that it's everyone's responsibility, who is your biggest sponsor in the organization?
You will need a management buy-in Obviously, the higher you can get it, the better, as with everything. I think a lot of problems we see in testing are systemic problems. And you cannot solve systemic problems without fixing the system, right? So team is usually the smallest item you can get to. The organizations I have worked with usually have a team where we trial this. And then, everybody can see how this works with the one team. And then they can see that, oh, wait, they release, 3 times every week? How? This is how. And also, if you are in a team that has just done the agile transformation, right, the dreaded, don't try to fix all of the things. Pick the one problem that holds your team back most and start there, right? Hope that is helpful. I'm not sure. Any more questions? Oh.
Do you like cats?
I hate them. Yes, I am a cat owner. Well, I am owned by a cat. Yeah. I try to keep the hair off my husband.
That is impressive. These pictures of your cats? Or?
I had a cat that looked just like that.
Yeah.
He unfortunately passed away last year. Still very sad. The rest of the pictures is, we are all into Gen AI these days, right? They're all mid-journey.
If you, a serious question, well, obviously, do you like cats is a serious question, but a serious question. When you remove the test column, how do the testers react? Because don't they feel that you've removed their visibility or whatever on the Scrum board or in the team?
Yes, there can be a bit of an anxiety. I mean, when I started testing, I used to be a chef, right? And then one day I wanted better work conditions, and so I got into testing. And the first company I worked with back in the day was actually somewhat forward. I don't know if you guys remember a virtual world called Second Life. It was quite a big thing in the time, so that's where I started. And we were working in Agile. And our Agile was exactly how I described, right? We had the board, and then things would go into in test, and then I would test them, and then they would go on. And I didn't question this, and I felt a little bit threatened when this idea of having no in test column anymore. It's like, but what? And I don't know what I'm going to do. So yes, there will probably be a little bit of pushback. However, and this is why I say, so find activities that people can get into easily and that help them to start working more closely with the rest of the team. These may be design reviews. Maybe that is something they like doing. Some people, normally, naturally, if you take a tester that has been doing manual regression testing, most of them will naturally either want to go more into design or more into code. People have preferences. Help them find a way that is, low barrier entry and help them along the way. That's what I would say.
I don't think I have really a question, but it's something that, your talk, amazing, brilliant, as Barzo said.
Am I blushing now?
But I think the one important part is, and I had a discussion about this with somebody recently, is that we should stop referring to ourselves as testers, but quality assurance, because that is what is easier then to remove the in test column, because you are part of the process and you're part of the development process and you are part of the quality assurance, and therefore you're trying to engage the whole team that's working on the process of development. So I think the hardest thing for me is not really how the testers will take it if you remove the test column, but how will the developers react to the fact that you're pushing testers to basically be part of their life?
Okay, to that I would say two things. Personally, I prefer quality coach over quality assurance, because really that is what we're doing. We're coaching people to consider quality in their work, even if their work isn't specifically about quality or testing. And in my experience, at least, most developers are quite happy to work with me or with the testers. Most developers, you kind of have to strike a bit of a balance. They need to do some deep thinking work. You cannot very well mentally design or architect a solution to a really tricky coding problem. But on the other hand, it may help you design this solution if you can rubber duck it with somebody, right? So I find they are you gotta strike a balance, and you gotta build your relationships. This is another thing. I find that most problems in software development, like in real life, are not really tooling problems, they're people problems. Right? So work with the people.
One last question, someone? Okay.
I would like to ask, this approach is great for proactive testers and quality coaches as well. But I met in my career a lot of very passive testers, and they do not care about the development until the test column has some items. How did you deal with these less active, less proactive testers, if you met some?
That is a very delicate question. Let me think about how I can put this very politely. I live in the UK, we like polite. I would say that everybody who does not have passion for what they're doing probably need a little bit of coaching to figure out what they want to be doing. That's probably the politest I can put it.
Okay. Maybe one last question?
You have time to fill. Or you have to have another break. The horror, huh?
Okay. So I think big applause for Katja.